Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. The Second Appeals Court in New York heard from Ghislaine Maxwell's attorneys, the state's attorneys, Virginia Robert's attorneys, and the attorneys from the Miami Herald today in regards to the sealed documents that were sent to them after Preska unsealed them, but Maxwell's team appealed. So, the three-panel court heard from all of the lawyers today as they tried to figure out if they were going to unseal these documents. And it was kind of a disjointed hearing, to be honest with you. I listened in on it, and there was just a lot of, it seemed like confusion from all sides. I mean, listening to David Boyes talk, there was a lot of and he didn't really seem to have the answers that the judges were looking for. And the same went for Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyer, Mr. Mueller, in a few instances where it was the same thing, where they had asked him some questions, some pretty poignant questions as regards to the law, and he had nothing for them. But it seemed like each one of the lawyers, including the state and the Miami Herald, all had their moments where they were dumbfounded almost by questions by these judges. And on the judges' end, well, they had to keep asking over and over about if there was information that was being kept from them and all sorts of crazy stuff that I didn't, again, don't get me wrong, this isn't something I do as a hobby, right? I don't sit in on federal calls and hang out and listen to how the proceedings move. So this might be something that happens all the time at this point in a case like this, in an appeals court where the judges have a bunch of questions and counsel doesn't have all of the answers. I guess that could occur. But to me, it just seemed like it wasn't buttoned up correctly. Like there wasn't enough almost preparation on some of the parts of these lawyers. So I was just, I was pretty blown away listening to it for the 2.5 hours that it took place, when there were so many parts where the lawyers just couldn't come up with an answer to fit the question that the judges were asking. And then the judges on their part seemed confused about certain aspects of the case itself. Like they didn't know who had the case before Preska. And it was like, did your clerks not do any research? I don't know. Maybe it's just, maybe it was just so long and kind of procedurally boring, but it seemed like they were just not prepared, the judges even. So they didn't render a decision at the end of it. What I took from it personally was that these judges were still not swayed one way or the other, and that they needed to go and confer with themselves, obviously, and within their chamber privately to decide what sort of decision to render. But I honestly, to tell you the truth, I don't know which way they're leaning. Before coming into that hearing and listening in on it, I was definitely leaning toward everything being released, right? Because the Second Circuit Court of Appeals has set that precedent previously with the Jeffrey Epstein case. But this is one of those weird times where it's a civil case and a criminal case running at the same time, running concurrently. So who the hell knows what the appeals court's going to come up with? And I said that as well when we were discussing this previously. So I'm still at that same place. This hearing didn't change my mind one way or the other, but it seems like the court had a lot more questions than these lawyers had answers for. And that was a bit, it took me a bit off guard, because I figured the lawyers here would all be buttoned up, right? I figured everything would be locked and loaded and ready to go. But Maxwell's lawyers were super evasive. Like I said, David Boyes, who is a top-notch lawyer, he was kind of tongue-tied a few times, and I didn't expect to hear that, that's for sure. The lawyer for the Miami Herald, I forget her name, she did a pretty good job, but there was some like procedural stuff towards the end where she was deferring to Boyes. And then the lawyers for the state, the assistant attorney general, I forget her name as well right now, Porzinger, something like that. She did a decent job too, but there was a couple of points where the judges had some questions about procedure and certain aspects of why this stuff should be unsealed, and they didn't seem to have an answer for these judges. And from what I can tell, judges don't really care for that. They want some answers when you're in front of them, right? They definitely want some answers, and they want to hear what the hell you have to say and why this case is in front of them, and as in an appeals court. What's different now? What should they be looking at that is different than the ruling that Preska put down? That's what they're trying to get to. That's what they were trying to hammer out. And they didn't end up rendering a decision. So there's no word yet on when that decision will come down or anything like that, but rest assured, I will most definitely be on top of it, following it, and making sure that as soon as I have an idea of what's going on, that I'm jumping on here and I'm relating that to you, because there's a lot of legalese that's going on inside of these hearings, right? Of course, it's a courtroom. That's what happens. And there's a lot to swim through and a lot of information to process. So again, I'm not too sure which way the Second Circuit Appeals Court is going to swing here. I don't know if they're going to release this. I don't know if they're going to give it a stay. I don't know what the case is going to be. But if they don't release it, then I would guess that the lawyers for the Miami Herald, for the survivors, and maybe the state even, will appeal this to the whole entire appeals court and bank. So we'll see how it goes, but as of right now, I honestly, folks, don't know one way or the other which way the wind's blowing. The judges didn't really give off a sense, in my opinion anyway, of which way they were leaning. So let's jump into this article from the New York Post, and it's kind of an overview of what happened today at that appeals panel hearing. Headline: Appeals panel withholds decision on releasing details of Ghislaine Maxwell's sex life. Authored by Rebecca Rosenberg. Depositions related to Ghislaine Maxwell's sex life will remain secret for at least a little longer after a second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals on Tuesday heard arguments on whether to unseal the materials, but delayed issuing a decision. And that's, like I was just saying, at the end of the panel hearing, the hearing here, they had the judges transferred over to a private phone line, a private conversation, so that they could discuss what was going on. And at that point, we knew that there was not going to be a decision rendered, at least at that moment. Maybe there was going to be a decision a little bit afterwards. They would release it in writing or a memo, however that works. But so far, nothing. The three-judge panel did not disclose when it would rule on the possible release of the 7-hour, 418-page deposition. So again, they did not say one way or the other or give any indication which way or how or when that this would be disclosed. So we're going to have to play it by ear, right? And make sure we're following this, have our ears to the ground to make sure that we're definitely keeping right in the middle of all of this so there's no confusion and the conversation keeps rolling. Maxwell's lawyer, Adam Mueller, who I have to say did a pretty good job today. A much better job than we heard Cohen do during the hearing when she was first arrested. He didn't do that good of a job, in my opinion. He wasn't that good at the arraignment. But this Adam Mueller cat seems to really know his way around a courtroom and seems like he's going to be pretty formidable. I'm going to take a look at him a little bit later and see, just who he is, what cases he's worked on, but he seems to be a pretty sharp cat. And the prosecution and the lawyers for the survivors should probably take note of this guy and the way he conducts himself in the courtroom, because he was pretty bulldogish today, and besides a few lapses, he was pretty on point. And like I said earlier, all of the lawyers had some lapses here in front of the judges today from my point of view, but Mr. Mueller, the lawyer for Maxwell, did a really good job in the courtroom and had a very strong showing. Repeated an argument that releasing the materials would result in a wave of negative media and make it impossible for her to receive a fair trial in her federal sex trafficking case. And then there was an argument there as well that was made by the court and by the prosecution, I believe, saying that that would mean that there's a presumption that the jury pool is already tainted. Even if they release this documentation, they're presuming that because of this dump, because of this release, that it would taint the jury pool. And I thought that was an interesting point that the court brought up, because I think that will go towards the decision they make, right? If they think that it won't impact the trial, if they think it won't hurt her from having a fair trial, then they're definitely going to go ahead and release this stuff. So I thought it was a pretty interesting moment in the trial. The secret documents relate to testimony Maxwell, 58, gave in a now settled civil defamation lawsuit filed against her in 2015 by Jeffrey Epstein accuser Virginia Roberts. Maxwell made statements about consensual and intimate conduct with other adults, according to court papers. So, according to the court papers, Maxwell made statements inside of that deposition regarding her consensual conduct and intimate behavior with other adults. Yeah, I think there's a lot more in there. I think that the deposition definitely veered into other territory, okay? Non-consensual territory. If that was the case, if it was just about consenting adults and it was just embarrassing, would she really be fighting it this hard, spending this much money, bringing this sort of legal team on board? I highly doubt it, folks. She relied on a promise of confidentiality when she agreed to be deposed, Mueller told the panel. And look, I get it, right? There is definitely some confidentiality issues that are going on here. There is no doubt about that. And it's definitely something that the defense can argue, and it's definitely some it's a defensible position, honestly, to be honest with you. But I don't think it supersedes the right to the public's knowledge, considering this case, where it has come from, and the sort of douchebaggery that has occurred previously in this case. He added that many of the questions posed to Maxwell were leading and revealing akin to, when did you stop beating your wife? Look, I'm sure there are a lot of leading questions, and I'm sure a lot of it is very, very embarrassing. But at the end of the day, you can't go around being involved in a child sex trafficking ring. You can't be involved with people like Jeffrey Epstein and expect to have your secrecy and your privacy maintained. You have been under the microscope since all of this first happened. And if it wasn't for that illegal and draconian non-prosecution agreement, you would have been indicted a long time ago. So again, the technicalities are what they're looking for. Did she or did she not deny knowledge of any activity involving underage minors? Asked Judge Jose Cabranes. Mueller declined to answer the question, and I thought that was another pretty interesting point that the judge made by Mr. Jose Cabranes, who was the presiding judge here. He asked that question, and Mueller did not answer it. He said that it would perhaps bring stuff from the sealed documents to light now while it's still sealed, blah, 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 blah. Again, technicality type stuff, right? So I thought, again, there were a few points where the judges would ask questions, and I'd be like, oh, yeah, they're going to release these documents. And then there were other points where they'd ask questions of, like, David Boies or the assistant U.S. Attorney General, and I'd be like, oh, man, they're going to keep this stuff sealed. So again, it's one of these situations where I really can't put my finger on it. Usually I have a gut feeling one way or the other, like you guys know, and I'll have an opinion for you. But I really don't know which way they're leaning here. In her separate criminal case, Maxwell is charged with perjury for allegedly lying under oath during the 2016 deposition. U.S. District Judge Loretta Preska, who was overseeing the litigation over the release of the material, had ordered the documents unsealed in July. Maxwell's lawyers appealed the decision, leading to Tuesday's hearing. Robert's attorney, David Boies, argued that the public is entitled to the full release of the materials. And, that line of argument was fine and well, but I don't think he was being a good enough champion for the rights of Virginia in this case. He didn't make the case good enough, in my opinion. And defaulted back to the public being entitled, but the public is not his client. So it was a little weird, and I don't think it was David Boies' best showing, to be honest with you, with all of the tongue twists and stuff like that. I don't think it was the best showing, and man, I don't know. Again, I don't know. At one point, Judge Rosemary Pooler asked an attorney for the Miami Herald, who has been fighting for the deposition's release, Miss Maxwell may be a victim as well. Isn't that true? And when she asked that question, my jaw dropped. I mean, I get it. This is an appeals court. They're going to ask those kinds of questions, especially when the other side is saying that one of the reasons they want to keep the names of Jane Doe 1 and 2 from being revealed is because they're victims in the case, obviously. So if their names are being hidden and being kept private, why should Maxwell, if she's a victim as well, according to this judge, her line of questioning, playing devil's advocate, I would guess, why wouldn't Maxwell have the same presumption to those rights as well? And I think that's what this judge was getting at. But the lawyer for the Miami Herald pretty much shut it down right away and was like, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about here anyway. So, again, it was kind of an oh shit moment when you were like, did this judge really say that? Did Judge Rosemary Pooler really just say that? And I just kind of shook my head because you know that the defense will love to latch on to something like that. So, I think she was playing devil's advocate, but it certainly is a strategy that the defense is going to try and use, folks. They're going to try and use the fact that Maxwell was so-called a victim of Jeffrey Epstein. That's what they're going to try and use. Meanwhile, all of the evidence leads to Maxwell having a leadership role. And I think once you get into the trial phase and we're talking about the heavy hitters, once we have Alice and Mo arguing this case, I think it'll go in a different direction, obviously, because Alice and Mo is not going to let them off the hook. If she continues to approach things the way she did the arraignment, if she continues to approach things the way she has throughout the criminal portion of this so far, since Maxwell has been arrested, then I think that Alice and Mo is going to crush all of Maxwell's lawyers when it comes to trial time, when they're in the courtroom, when all of the evidence is lined up, when discovery is there. They're not going to be able to use, oh, well, Ghislaine was a victim as well. That shit's going to be shattered into a million pieces. The newspaper's lawyer, Christine Walls, said she disagreed with the characterization, but added it was irrelevant to whether the document should be released. And she went into it a little bit more than that, right? But the gist of it was she disagrees with the fact that Maxwell is a victim at all in this case, and furthermore, that it has nothing to do with if these documents should be released. In another hearing before the Second Circuit Tuesday, Maxwell's lawyers asked the panel to overturn U.S. District Judge Allison Nathan's decision, blocking her from using evidence turned over in the criminal case to fight the unsealing of the deposition in the civil matter. Nathan is overseeing the British socialite's sex trafficking case. So they were trying to get it all wrapped into one case, was what Maxwell's team was trying to do. And the defense and the lawyers for the survivors and obviously the state had wanted nothing to do with that. The panel said they'd issue their decision in both hearings at a later unspecified date. Maxwell was arrested over the summer on a 6-count federal indictment, charging her with grooming 3 underage girls to be sexually abused by her and Jeffrey Epstein. The late financier, pedophile, committed suicide, allegedly, while awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges last year. All right, folks, so there we are. This is where we're at so far with the deposition and the unsealing of these documents. We don't know when the ruling's going to come down. All sides have made their arguments. I don't know if they've been made well. In my opinion, maybe not so great. But all arguments have been made. And now, all we await on is for the judge's decision. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. All right, everybody, I hope you all have a fantastic day. I'll be back later on, and we'll pick it up.